Hello and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we're going to have a lot of fun today. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick trip over to one of the hottest billfish destinations anywhere, Nosara, Costa Rica, because I've got a word from my buddy Craig Sutton that the sailfish and marlin bite over there is wide open. Then we're coming back to Florida, and we're going to take a trip all the way around the state. And what we're going to do is check in with the leading expert in each area and find out what's going on with their fishing, what's going on with their water quality, the bait supply, what the red hot lure is. You want to know it? We'll find it out. And listen, if you think of something during the week that you want us to check with the Action Spotters on, just drop me a line at rick@floridasportsman.com, and I will gladly pass along your question, or you can ask us on Florida Sportsman Facebook. The Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast is brought to you each and every week by Yamaha, reliability starts here, by Shimano, by Nosara, Paradise Fishing, by Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth, and by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat, spay, and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Let's get this thing rolling and make a quick trip to Nosara Paradise in beautiful Costa Rica. Craig, let me taxi here to the end of the runway so we can talk. How are you, my boy?
I'm good, Ricky. Real good, man. Fishing's great in Costa Rica right now, buddy.
Man.
We're catching them 6 miles from port, and we're doing, on a full day, we're doing double-digit releases and a few marlin mixed in with some nice dorada. Now, we haven't this week, talking yesterday and today, we haven't caught any big dorada, but we caught some nice ones. Definite 20-pounders, but we've got, listen to this report. The Adventurer went out on Friday, had a rooster, about a 45-pound rooster, went out and went 3 for 4 on the sailfish, and had a striped marlin released in a dorada.
How about that? You know what a 20-pound mahi is, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
That's a Mayport 35.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That is.
He went out the next 2 days later. The guy was a rooster fisherman. He's from Indiana-Atlantic, and he told me when he booked us, I want a rooster. Went out the second time, got about a 55-pound rooster, a nice big one. Then went 3 for 3 on the sail and another marlin.
Wow. What do you catch those big roosters on?
Live bonita.
Live bonita? Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to catch a big one, you don't. And everybody in Central America uses blue runners or Jaywitas, but we only use the Jaywitas if we have to. It's the easiest bait to get, no question. But you're not going to get the quality fish that you'll get with a live bonita or even a live yellowfin.
Craigie, I don't know anything big that the best live bait for is not a live bonita or a live yellowfin tuna.
Oh, without question. Without question. I mean, I've been fishing down there in Central America since I was 18, and I'm 67 now. But
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Would you speak up a little bit? You're how old now?
67.
Okay, just a baby. But go ahead.
Yeah, just a baby. But they won't turn that bonita or the yellowfin down. And I mean, I've seen it so many times over and over and over again. And for us being a charter operation, we don't want to catch a lot of fish, but we want to catch the really prized big fish. I told my guys almost 16 years ago, I said, they'll never remember those 10 5-pound or 10-pound mahi, but they're going to remember that 160-pound rooster fish.
Bingo.
And if you're going to target those, you better have that right bait in the water.
You're exactly right. And how many times have we seen it to where you've got a party of people and a rod goes off and everybody's, oh, you get him. I got the last one. Oh, you get him. You can actually overdo it on charters, and I'm with you. You're much better to go for great quality fish than you are just massive numbers of fish.
Without question. You know the old saying, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered.
There you go. Excellent report, Craig. How long do you look for this sailfish bite to hold up?
I'm hoping it stays at least another week or two. It's been there almost 2 weeks now. They're still biting good and strong, so I don't know. Thankfully, that they stay for as long as possible.
That's fantastic. Craigie, thank you so much. Tell me we can talk to you next week.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it, buddy. Craig Sutton from Nosara Paradise Fishing. You can reach him at 904-591-2161 or fishingnosara.com. All right, now we're going to hit Florida. Let's get up in the northeast corner and see what Captain David Voorhees is up to. He hasn't been nearly as warm for the last week or so as Craig Sutton has. David, are you with us?
Hey, Captain Ricky, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good, but I just had to come back from Nosara to talk to you. It's colder up here than it is over there.
Quite a bit. And I tell you, man, we've been getting cold and rain, a lot of rain, in the last few weeks. That's really contributed to the clarity of the water. Normally, we're talking about clear water this time of year, but man, I haven't seen that this week. I tell you, it's been dirty in a lot of spots. And Rick, the water temperature is slightly starting to move up, but not fast enough. But the main thing is it's just the weather has just been horrible. The tides have not been getting as low as we like on this moon we've had. Coming up next week, we've got much better moon phase. We've got some late evening low tides. I'm pretty sure the fishing's going to get a lot better after this little bit of warming trend we're going to get here. But it's been a tough week, Rick, and we just haven't seen a lot of fish. And the ones we see, we really had to work hard for it. I was surprised how many flounder I caught this week. Some of them came out of the back creeks and, some decent keeper flounder. And that's all going to change next month. The flounder season will be closed, so you won't be able to keep a flounder starting March 1st. I think it'll run, a month and a half, something like that. But anyway, just keep that in mind. But with that being said, Rick, it's just been a tough week between the cold, the wind, and the wind really affects the fishermen more than it affects the fish. But it really puts a lot of pressure on the fisherman and makes it very difficult for him to feel these bites. And, these fish aren't really, they're not knocking your line down. They're not hitting really hard. The bite's been very soft, very subtle. And if you just don't have a tight line, just for a brief moment when that fish hits, you're going to miss your fish.
It's just not the aggressive bite that it is once the water warms up, is it?
No, and we'll see, when it gets up, when it hits 65, it starts getting up there. We've been seeing water temperatures around 57, 58. But I got a feeling this week we got a really good warming trend. I think we're going to inch on up into the 60s, and hopefully real soon we'll be seeing that 65-degree water temperature.
Is that a magic number for you? Is that when things get easier?
Yes, that's when things get easier. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I've got a question for you, David, and let me give you a quick offshore report. You ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
There, I'm done. It's been windy and rough.
That's quick.
But I've got a question for you. Jim Ross, down in the East Central section, tells me that their sea trout have now been lowered to 2 per person. Would you welcome that here as an angler? And would you welcome it as a charter boat captain?
Wow, Rick. I haven't really hit my quota on trout. I can't even tell you the last time I've actually even gotten my limit of 5 trout. We're just not seeing that many trout this year. It has been a really pathetic trout year. Rick, I would like to give this a little more time to see if all these changes are going to work. I hate it when they just start throwing things up against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
And they do it too quick. Give it 4 or 5 years. Fix the laws, adjust them the way you want it. Once you get them adjusted, let's let it run for a few years. Let's see what's going to happen. You're not going to see change overnight when it comes to fishing, Rick, and I just don't understand. They just changed these laws, and here we are, 2 years later, they're ready to change them again?
Yeah.
I don't get it, Rick.
Yeah, I don't get that either, and I certainly understand your thought process there. And I'm also kind of haunted by the idea that I don't think fishermen are the problem. I don't think overfishing is a problem or over-harvesting. I think it's a water quality issue, David.
Rick, I would have argued with you 2 years ago. I would have argued with you, and I probably did a few times. But you know what? the more and more I think about it, because nobody's catching these trout. So what's happening to these trout? You know, it's not like we're seeing all this overfishing and stuff of this species, even commercially or whatever. That's not the case. But it seems like we're still dealing with declining numbers.
And guys like you and Tony Bozzella and others have led the charge to never keep a fish over 5 pounds. Very few people are keeping the really big trout, and yet our numbers continually trend downward. So I don't think we're the problem. Maybe by going to 2 fish, we can be part of the solution, but it does seem to be a knee-jerk reaction to the fact that things did not improve in the last couple of years when we went down to 5 fish. You're right. Doesn't matter. The limit could be 100 fish now. We're not catching more than 2 or 3 a day anyway.
Yep. I mean, like I said, we had 5 trout the other day we fished, and out of the 5, we had 1 keeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was it, you know, and that was, you know, spending 2 hours on trying to catch trout, you know, and I sort of divide my day up. Part of it I'm going to be catching reds, and then part of it I will try to go and catch some trout. And we're just not seeing the numbers, Rick. We're just not. I mean, next year it might be gangbuster. And fishing goes in these cycles. We've seen this in the past.
Yes, it does.
One year you will have just a horrible year, and you're thinking, "Whoa, my God, what's going on?" And then the next year it's like, "My God!" I mean, look at the king mackerel. You know, we thought that was a thing of the past, and you know, the past year it's been like unbelievable. Past 2 years it's been some of the best king fishing guys can remember.
Yep, you're right. I hope the same for the trout. As always, thank you, David. Thank you so much for your report and your insights. We always appreciate them.
All right, Ricky. Tight lines, everybody.
Tight lines to you too, buddy. Now we're going to pull down to the East Central. I've got some questions for one Captain Jim Ross. Jim, are you with us?
I'm here, buddy. I'm here.
First off, did any fish bite this week?
Yes, they did.
Good.
Yes, they did.
Good. What?
Well, we had a pretty good bite on the black drum up at the Ponce Inlet. Most of those fish were pretty big fish, too. They looked like they were in the 30 to 50-pound class. So I think a lot of those fish that we had found running up the beach between Sebastian and Canaveral kind of stopped and stayed for a couple of days up at the Ponce Inlet area. Now, it's been blowing for the last couple of days really hard, 15 to 20 every day. In fact, I had to cancel my trip today because we weren't going to do any triple tailing at 4 foot at 6 seconds.
No.
But at least not in my bay boat. Somebody else's bay boat might have gone, but mine didn't. And so there's triple tail out there. There's a lot of floating debris, and most of the debris, almost anything you come up on, has the potential to hold fish on it, and in often cases is holding fish on it. The other thing is there's a lot of gannets that are still diving out there, and right before the wind started blowing, the sharks really started to get thick between Canaveral and Sebastian. Between those two inlets, guys were catching a lot more sharks, mainly black tips, a couple of spinners, some fine tooth, but they were in thick enough schools that you could actually target them with artificial chuggers and stuff. So that's always a pretty cool thing to be able to do.
That is cool.
Get a shark to chase a topwater plug. So, for those of us that, don't really care if we're putting it in the fish box or if we're just releasing it at the boat side, that's a whole lot of fun. The inshore bite has not been very good the last couple of days. And I have a feeling it has a lot to do with the way that the moon is right now. It's just not in a favorable position whenever we're out there in the mornings. However, having said that, as we come into this next weekend, it's going to be much better. So I'm looking forward to the last part of this weekend, the first part of the weekend, myself anyway, because I think that our bite is going to really just turn around and go exactly the opposite direction of what it had been these last couple of days. But trout, redfish, and snook are all shutting down pretty early, first thing in the morning, and then they're not really biting until way late in the afternoon once again. But that, like I said, that is going to change, I believe, with this change of moon as we cycle on through, coming through this full moon.
I guess you've got the same offshore report that I do. There, that was it.
Yeah. You've heard it.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, I got a question for you though. You guys, your East Central region went to 2 sea trout per person back in, I guess you told me October, November, something like that. Has it affected it any? And Do you support it? Would you like to see it stay at 2, or do you want it to go back?
No, I don't mind it being at 2 at all. And here's the reason why, Rick. This used to be a destination location.
Right.
And people used to spend a week here fishing every day. When I first started guiding, now we're dating ourselves, right?
Yep.
But back 20 plus years ago,
We're old men.
the Indian River, Banana River, and Mosquito Lagoon complexes were known as a destination that you needed to go to if you wanted giant redfish, tailing redfish out on the flats, 200, 250, 300 fish. And if you wanted to catch one as in a sight fishing application, this was the place to do it. Also, if you wanted a gator trout, if you wanted a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-ish, or at least a shot at that size speckled trout, you came here. This was the place to be if you wanted to target big gator trout, especially for those people that like throwing topwater plugs. Anymore, if I catch a trout that's bigger than 3 pounds, I feel like I've accomplished something.
Yeah.
So I've seen this fishery in some pretty good times, and I see this fishery as it is right now in absolutely deplorable conditions, historically low numbers of fish in our lagoon systems, simply because we have done everything we possibly could do to destroy the habitat in this system with our development, overdevelopment. And I'm a big proponent of trying to keep enough fish in the water to keep people interested in going fishing. So if it takes a 2 fish per person on trout and it takes a couple of months close season, I'm all for it.
And I agree with you. I don't mind it at 2. Trout don't freeze worth a flip anyway. And I'd rather take my 2 and go plant a few oyster bars. Let's get the fishery back.
The one thing that I cannot understand why the November, December close season, because our trout don't generally spawn during that time frame. And they don't generally get cold stress during that time frame. When they get cold stress is normally January and occasionally into the first part of February, but mainly January. That's our cold stress month. So if you're looking at it from a standpoint of trying to have somebody not out there maybe dip netting trout, gigging trout, doing snagging a trout, I'm not exactly sure that they've got the close season just right. But I'm not an FWC biologist. But I can tell you that the trout that we did fillet for our customers in January, 2 things. One, most of them looked like an amberjack. They had so many worms in them.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, all of the females that were in the 16 to 21 inch range, every single one that we cleaned, Justin and I cleaned, had the beginnings of roe sacs in them that looked like they were about a month into production. And that tells me that in March and April, that's when those fish are planning on spawning. So if you're trying to save that fishery or help that fishery, I would think that a different time of the year would be a better time to have a closed season and let those fish reproduce.
Yep.
That's just my 2 cents for whatever that's worth.
Yep. Well said, Jimmy. Well said. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for a great report. Please tell me we can talk to you again next week.
I look forward to it, and hopefully we're going to have some great offshore news for you guys next week.
Looks like it. Looks like the weather's getting right. Thank you, Jim.
Take care.
Now, let's pull down to my favorite little fishing village in Florida, Stuart, Florida. I love it there this time of year, boy. Captain John Earhart, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Good. How's the fishing going for you?
The fishing's been a little tough for us with all this wind, but when we have been able to get offshore, the mahi bite still has been really strong. Myself and every other boat that's been going out, when they've been able to get out, has been catching anywhere from 6 to 10 mahis, a few sailfish. I've seen a couple of nice wahoo caught, even a few blackfins. So it's been really good for pelagics, and that action's been anywhere from 80 to 180 feet of water right now. There's been some weed lines, some a few color changes, some nice edges. So if you find any kind of condition like that, when the weather allows you to get out, it's been full bore action for pelagics right now. So if you can get out there, have a few dozen extra ballyhoo rigged up, because chances are you're going to go through them.
John, I kind of hate to step out in faith on this, but I've watched that mahi bite for the last month or 5 weeks or so down there, and It really seems good. Could we be headed for a good year?
I don't want to jinx myself, but I'm thinking this could be a really good year. And if it continues, we may have an epic spring run, where we get those peanuts first thing, and then we get some big bull dolphins in March and April. I'm really got my fingers crossed because I'm thinking that very well may happen.
Well, I tell you what, I went on the heels of a buddy of mine down there that had an excellent day on triple tail last week, fishing around the channel markers. We went the next day and struggled. We got one, but that was it. Saw a few pompano. Have the pompano started biting again, or are they still kind of quiet?
It's been really hit and miss this week. I'm every day I go out on the sailfish flats, I'm skipping 6 to 10 pompano, but I'm struggling to get them to bite. I'll skip a couple pompano, we'll stop, we'll be drifting, or we'll anchor right there, and we're casting our goofy jigs or some fish bites out on some pompano rigs. But the ladyfish and the bonefish have kind of been a problem. So it's like I'm seeing the pompano, but it just seems like they're not really biting that well this week. So I think when this wind lays down and the river kind of settles down and we get that silty colored water out of the river and that clean water moves in and the temperature changes a few degrees, I think it's going to be full bore pompano action. That last couple weeks of February is usually the peak of the run. So if you want to go out there and get limits of pompano, we're fast approaching the end and we're at the peak right now. So we are due for a good pompano run this week.
Yeah, I think the next couple of weeks may be very strong. I see kind of a moderating of the weather just like you do, and we may be right on the cusp of something really good. Well, John, I appreciate the heck out of it. You can go ahead and send those mahi on up to Jacksonville as soon as you're done with them, because I sure would like to see them show up here.
All right, the ones that make it through, I'm going to tell them to head straight to Jacksonville for you.
Thanks, Cap. I appreciate it.
Yep, I'll talk to you next week.
All right, good deal. I hope he tells them not to eat any ballyhoo on the way up. Let's go further south and see if the pompano have made it that far down by checking in with Alan Sherman. Alan, how are you?
Rick, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm cold and I'm windy, but what the heck? Better days are ahead.
Did you get a front recently?
Woo! We got a booger. Got cold and got windy, and it rained.
Was that today or yesterday?
No, yesterday and day before.
Okay, because I know we're due for one here soon. I'm just not sure when it's coming.
Mm-hmm. How's your fishing been?
Inshore and offshore, flamingo. Not a lot to talk about. I mean, maybe the fish are there. They're just not biting, but it seems more like they're just not there. With the exception of kingfish. There's been some nice kingfish being caught just outside the outer reef, anywhere from 80 feet to, I'd say, maybe 160. And it's not just in one area. It seems to be up and down the coast, maybe as far as Deerfield Beach, and then all the way down to Ocean Reef. They're not slaying them, but the ones that they're catching are like 15 to as big as 50.
That's a big one.
Not a lot of those that size, with the majority of being in the 10-pound class. But, it's unusual to see the big kingfish this early. Usually we see them late March, April, May, full of roe. But there's been a few of these big fish around, and they're mostly being caught by the guys sail fishing. And there hasn't been a lot of sailfish around. I talked to Jimbo Thomas. He was out all day Saturday, and he had to do a lot of different kinds of fishing to make a catch. He said in the morning they had a couple of bonitas and they couldn't get a bite on the surface. They went in and fished some of the shallow reefs and trolled some ballyhoo and got a handful of mutton snappers, with 3 or 4 being of legal size. They also had some groupers that were undersized but had to be released anyway. And then they had some Cero and Spanish mackerel that were feeding on schools of ballyhoo that were in the area. Then he went offshore again, and they got a sailfish and a nice kingfish. So, I say that because they tried 3 different techniques for a whole day to make something happen. You're going to have to work to make a catch, but there are some quality fish out there. You tangle with a big kingfish up to 50 pounds, and, that's a fish of a lifetime.
That's a great fish. But Alan, you said something that might have gone right over some people and
Sure.
really hit home with me. Here's Jimbo Thomas, and he goes offshore in the morning. He goes through all that to get his spread out, and he works for a while, and it's not happening. So he goes inshore to make sure his people are going to have something to take home to eat. and they get some muttons in grouper, even if they had to throw them back. But then he turns right around and goes back offshore and gives that another try. You can really tell what makes Jimbo Thomas Jimbo Thomas. I mean, you may step on a charter boat, they put out 2 drone spoons and 2 tube lures, and they troll all day long, and you catch what you catch. But I love it when I see somebody that's dedicated to their craft like he is.
Well, that's for sure. The guys on the Thomas Flyer, they're the top of the line, doing it their whole lives, so you got to do what you have to do to make a catch. There's many a times where I'll fish a spot in the morning and nothing happens, and I'll turn around and come back hours later, and the people say, "This looks familiar. Didn't we already fish this? Why are we here?" And I say, "Well, because I know there's fish here. I just don't know why they're not feeding. They should have fed in the morning, but they didn't. So maybe they'll feed in the afternoon." And sometimes they do. So, it's not a bad idea to hit the same spot more than once during the day. If you're struggling. We fished today, and we spent a lot of time catching bait. We were sabiki rigging pilchards in Fisherman's Channel. That's near Government Cut, and there were plenty of bait. Typically, this time of the year, there'll be Spanish mackerel, bluefish, and small kingfish feeding on those bait fish schools, but that wasn't the case today. There was very little, if anything, feeding on those bait fish schools. Other than that, Rick, there's been a few dolphin around, small ones, schoolie size, nothing to count on. We have an east wind right now. As long as the winds stay in the east, we might see some more dolphins show up. But there's been a few blackfin tunas, a few wahoo. I know a lot of guys are still hitting the reefs for the almacos and amberjacks, and they are catching them. And there's been a few bigger muttons on those wrecks as well. I did spend Saturday in Flamingo, and a lot of wind. It was chilly. We caught a few sea trout, a few snook, and as many ladyfish as you could care to catch. But plenty of action.
It's funny, Alan. At one time, ladyfish was the number 2 exported fish out of Florida, right behind mullet. I never knew that, but interestingly, obviously we don't gill net ladyfish and mullet anymore. But I don't see the massive numbers of ladyfish that we used to see. And I've often wondered why. We've still got them.
Do you get them up there in Jacksonville?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we get them.
Okay.
Alan, we've caught them here up to 8 pounds. I mean, we've caught some monsters up here. But
that is a monster.
We used to see schools of them that would stretch over a half an acre, and we never see that anymore. And I've always wondered why.
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
I know that we used to have them in our bay, at North Bay, South Bay, in giant numbers, and there's still some around. But we just don't have the grass flats in our area that harbor the shrimp population.
True.
Or even keep the little bait fish safe. And those ladyfish, they depend on those fish. Those little glass minnows and the bay shrimp. That's what makes up most of their diet. And when you lose those in big numbers, you also lose the fish that feed on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We are starting to see a increase in the number of pilchards in the river, though, in small bay river, what we call river pogies, the little river menhaden, and also maybe they'll come back after that. I hope so. As always, we appreciate it so much, and thanks for a great report.
No problem, Rick. Hopefully the next week the fish will be chopping.
I'll be ready to hear about it. Thank you, Cap. Captain Alan Sherman checking in from Miami. Hey, Alan and all our action spotters are brought to you each and every week by Shimano. We're so proud to welcome Shimano as a new sponsor to the podcast. By Yamaha, reliability starts here. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils. Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at yamahaoutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha, reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is the mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to his name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Now, we're going to hop straight across the state, going to get into 10,000 Islands, where we're going to hunt down one Captain Steve Dahl. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rick. How are you doing today?
Doing outstanding, my boy. Doing outstanding. What's going on in 10,000 Islands?
Every one of the islands has fish on it.
That's a good thing.
We're doing pretty good. This recent warming trend we had down here, it seems like the only part of the country that had a warming trend recently, but our kind of water temperatures in that magic 72, 73 degree range, and everything's kind of come alive, especially in the backcountry. The nearshore wrecks and reefs have continued to be stellar this year, but our backcountry starting to really get fired up a little bit, and we're starting to see the snook getting a little bit more active with the warmer weather, which has been great. They're readily, last week they were kind of only taking artificial or live bait, and this week it seems like they're willing to take some artificial, so that's even good. The redfish bite, while we're not, it's not really our time of year for the big fish, we're seeing lots of numbers, which is great, and our trout fishing continues just to be rock solid. So the big three there are doing really well in the backcountry, and then we're starting to kind of see our shoot sets show up a little bit more inshore. We've been crushing those on the near shore side of things, like near shore wrecks and reefs, but they're starting to kind of move up a little bit onto the outside islands, a little bit shallower water. We're not getting those big fish, those 4, 5, 6 pound sheepshead, but we're getting definitely some keeper sized fish, lots of fish in the mid-teen range as far as inches, so that's good. And then we're starting to see some pompano in the mix, which is pretty awesome. And we're starting to see that a little bit more on the sandy side, and I kind of call that, Cape Romano through Naples, all throughout the beaches and shoals kind of down there. And a little bit east and north of our region. So, and we're finding those pompano actually a little bit deeper actually than we normally do. So kind of move out from your typical wintertime pompano spots, and you're going to find them. It's almost like they're staging to move up, if you will. And we're catching them as deep as 14, 15 feet of water. So, you may have to get a little creative. If you like jigging for them, you may have to go to like a 3/8 ounce jig, even a half ounce jig if you really want to rip that thing, like a hop ball cadence, seems to be the deal.
Let me ask you a question. Is there a magic temperature that you look for so you can switch from bait to artificials?
I like that 72 mark. I really do. It seems to be the mark, at least in our area. Maybe a little bit, once that thing hits 72 on a consistent basis, now I'm looking, I think their metabolism just fires up. I mean, we're in a part of the, state where it's about as south as you can get, with the exception, the Keys. Cold fronts dramatically affect our fish, and I'm not saying they don't in other parts of the state, but as tropical of a climate as we have, largemouth bass in Florida, like a Florida strain largemouth bass, has been well known to just shut down on cold fronts in the state of Florida. Snook are the same way. They just get locked off. I think we often forget, while it's still beautiful outside, maybe a 55-degree morning, 60-degree morning, and, if that water temperature drops just too much, those fish are just going to turn off.
Gotcha. Well, that tells us a lot. Golly, it sure sounds like you guys get a much better deal in the wintertime than we do up north. Because, buddy, I'm going to tell you what, it is some kind of shutdown up here as our water temperature hovers around 54. We don't have very many fish that like that very much.
That's one of the kind of beauties, too, is, as shallow as our area is, it can get cold really fast, but it also can get warm really fast.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't too many, a couple weeks ago, we were flirting with those upper 50-degree water temperatures in the morning. And look, I mean, it's boomed, a good, 12 to 14 degrees consistently over the last few weeks. So that warming trend certainly helps. And it's got fish on the move and active, their metabolism's going. But I'm with you. That stuff is downright critical for the 50-degree water temperature. That's a tough mark.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Cap, as always, we appreciate your report so much. Please tell me we can talk with you again next week.
Always looking forward to it, Rick.
Now we are going to move upstream a little bit. Let's pull into Southwest Florida, where I'm going to tell you folks, the best fisherman in the whole area, Captain Greg Stamper, and I know that's true because he told me himself. Captain Greg, how are you?
I'm not as good as Captain Rick Riles up there in the north region, but I do my best, and I go after what I can when I can.
Bobby, it's cold up here. You don't want to be up here.
You know what, Rick? It was cold the last 2 mornings, and that did stunt our redfish bite, but everything else has been going along pretty well.
What's happening?
So we'll start with what I've been doing. When it gets cold out, we know that there's fish that kind of don't mind it, and we know there's fish that really don't like it. So we pretty much stayed away from snook the last couple days. But before that, we were catching a few here and there. But the redfish bite before this last front that we just received a day or two ago was fantastic. We were catching some big reds. I'm talking about fish that were over slot. I told the guy that we were on the boat, he got a big one. He got one that was like 32 inches. Mm-hmm. I said, man, you're never going to get one bigger than this back here. And you know what? They got another big one after that. So it's been that good, but the last 2 days after this front came in, it did shut down. But what didn't shut down was the pompano bite, the trout bite. There's a lot of mackerel in the back, which means they're definitely off our beaches in full speed. And we've got a lot of other things like ladyfish and stuff like that. But what I got to tell you about, Rick, is the offshore guys did really well this week before the front, bringing back a whole bunch of cobia and permit. And you've got to fish with these things on crab. If you're using crab, you catch them at nighttime, Rick, on our outgoing tides. You're going to find these crabs flowing out. You can catch hundreds of them. Put them in your pin, put them in your live well, and then go out there on these wrecks and these reefs anywhere from 10 miles out to about 30 miles, and you can catch these permit right now. They're out there, which is crazy because it's still pretty cold and pretty early, but these guys are wrecking them. The unfortunate part is you get on some of these wrecks and reefs, and the word is out, so there might be 5, 6, 7 boats trying to fish something that's really not made for 5, 6, 7 boats.
Right. That's crazy. I didn't think there were that many boats down there altogether. And let me ask you, you said something about bringing them back. Are the guys down there keeping permit?
Every once in a while, the guys will keep the smaller ones.
Uh-huh.
I don't keep permit. Just like I don't keep snook, I let them go. But some guys will keep a few permit as long as they're on the smaller side. We're not talking about permit that are over maybe 10 pounds-ish, because we catch them up to 30, 35. Sometimes you'll see some fish that are probably close to 40. Those fish are never brought in. They just let those things go.
Now let me ask you, is there a bag and size limit on them?
Yeah, there's one per person. So most of the people that are going out there, if they do want to keep one, they'll keep a fish. But for the most part, even if you have 2 or 3 guys in the boat, they're not keeping a bunch of them. A lot of people frown on keeping those permits, which I do as well. But to be honest with you, Rick, they are good eating. It's just like a gigantic pompano. Uh-huh. But if you get something that's over 10, 15 pounds, they're not going to keep those fish. They're just going to let them go and breed.
Gotcha. That's a good plan. I wish we'd learned that about all our fish. That's for sure. Hey, Greg, let me ask you a question before you go. On the east central section of Florida, they have lowered the trout bag limit because they're having so much water quality trouble. They have lowered the trout bag limit to 2 per person. Would you support that in your area, or are your fish pretty healthy?
So, well, I mean, we've talked about this several times. So we had that massive red tide that really decimated the trout population. I believe they're the first ones to leave and the last ones to come back. Right now, as I currently stand in my fishing area, I can definitely catch a whole bunch of fish that are between 15 and 22, maybe 23 inches, but nothing bigger than that, Rick, because they've been slowly coming back over time. The last year, maybe year and a half, we've caught a lot more than we would have ever seen in the past. Before the red tide, we caught a lot, but it took about 2 years for them to come back. Mm-hmm. I would tell you, in my neck of the woods, I'm very supportive of the closures with the redfish, the snook, and the trout. It's made a huge difference. I don't know. I think that once we get to May, maybe a little bit later, we're going to be able to catch quite a few trout. I think in my neck of the woods, catching 4 of them under 20 inches and not even keeping one over 20 would be totally fine. But I still want to see that thing move forward. I want these fish to keep spawning so that we have more and more in the future. It did take some time, Rick. I was very appreciative about a year and a half ago when I caught the first trout I've seen in 2 years. So I know what it was like when they were gone, and I do know they probably need to be managed. But quite honestly, I can tell you this. The trout will tell you about your water quality.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You hit the nail on the head right there. When that's one of the things you look for to wonder if you've got water quality issues is how you're doing on trout. All right, I want you to write this down. These are wise words here from Captain Ricky. Are you ready?
Okay.
I know I know you're on the edge of your seat. You can hardly stand it, but here they come. I'm telling you that I am beginning to believe that a red tide is much like a forest fire. And by that I mean when we have a burning in the woods, the stuff that comes back stronger than the old stuff was. I'm telling you, I think you guys, when your fishery opens back up, I think it's going to boom for the next 5 years. Don't ask me to explain it. That's in God's hands, not mine. But it more and more, it looks to me, Greg, like when an area repopulates after a natural disaster, that it repopulates to even better numbers than it was before. You agree with that?
I'm with you there. The fact that we've seen these permit here so early is a big deal. The fact that the trout, I can go out now and catch 40 or 50 of them on a given day, as long as we don't have this mucked up water and everything's good, is a positive note. And Rick, you got to remember, you still got to come out here and catch a permit with me.
I want to, Greg, so bad. And I'm going to find a day to get down there, I promise. I appreciate it so much, Snooky. Can we look forward to talking to you next week?
You got it, Rick. I'll talk to you next week.
We're going to pull up into West Central, where nobody knows that area like one Captain Ray Markham. Captain Ray, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
All right. I want to hear about the fishing in the West Central area.
A lot of good stuff going on. We've had some decent weather. I mean, a little breezy yesterday, but weather's been pretty decent. Guys are getting out, and they're waxing the red grouper inside that 120-foot mark. Still doing really well with hogfish. They're catching a lot of mangrove snapper, bunch of beeliners, every kind of snapper you can think of they're catching right now. Obviously, they can't keep red snapper right now, but, everything's available out there. Deep water stuff beyond about 120 feet, they're catching some blackfin tuna. So, it's been a busy thing offshore. And if you get back towards the nearshore waters, they're starting to clear up a little bit with the wind coming down, and they've been catching Spanish mackerel both inside Tampa Bay, at the mouth of the bay, and also along the nearshore waters along the beaches.
Yeah, spring is clearly on the way. Now, Ray, it looks to me like there's a good chance of you guys having an opening May 31st, I think it is, for grids and trout. Over on the east central section, they have lowered trout to 2 per person. Would you be in favor of that, or do you want to see it open at 4?
Well, honestly, I don't know what the science is on the east side. If they said that on the south side, I'd say absolutely no. according to my information that I have, they had done a stock assessment, at least on the West Coast here as of the end of, I believe, November of last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they're making their decisions right now are probably twofold. One, because of the science that they had recently determined, and also two, based on what people are seeing out here. But I would have to say that the majority of their decisions are science-based. You know, there's going to be people who disagree and people who agree. And the bottom line is, as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be science-based. And if they determine that the spawning potential ratio that they are looking for to maintain a sustainable fishery is not up to par, then they need to do something about it one way or another. Either it's going to be a closed season or reduced bags or a change of the slot. So those are the options that typically they have, regardless of what the species is or anything else. And if they're saying cut it down to 2, at least you still have 2 fish you can pursue. But when I have people that call me and say, what can we keep? And I say, well, I'm sorry, snook, trout, and redfish are closed, and those are their 3 primary targets. And especially if they get to take one of them or all of them home or any of them, that's what they want to do. And if they can't, they're real tempted to say, well, you know, we'll call you again another time.
We'll go play golf.
You mentioned, but look forward to redfish and trout reopening the beginning of June. And as far as I'm concerned, it can't be soon enough.
I understand, and I know your customers are certainly waiting for it too, because everybody likes to take fresh fish home. It just occurs to me that trout don't freeze that well anyway. It wouldn't break my heart to see them go to 2 per person, but I'm only speaking for myself. For those people that like to take them home and freeze them, God love them. If the population can withstand it, if the fishery's healthy, I don't have any problem with it making it 4 or 5. But the problem with it on the East Coast is clearly water quality, and that's what has to be addressed. It's just whether or not the fishermen can help it by reducing their take too, and I can understand that way of thinking. Cap,
Totally
we appreciate it as always, and we look forward to talking with you next week if that's okay.
Yeah, buddy.
Now, we're going to pull on up to Homosassa, Florida, and check in with one William Tony. Tell us what's going on with the fishing in Homosassa.
All right, here's the big deal. You know, we've had a pretty tough winter as far as being cold.
Yes.
Tides and wind.
Yes.
And fish today had a great, I mean, as far as compared to this past weekend, we got about 15 to 24 more feet of water than we did this weekend.
How much?
It was so... I'm just kidding. Exaggeration here.
Okay.
But it was so dry here, there was actually real estate from China poking up in the Homosassa River. But we had a great day on Monday here today with an incoming tide, southwest wind, pushed the water in. The bite was fantastic. Catching nice trout on the DOA 5.5-inch jerkbaits on the rocky points on the inside edges of the outside. So I'll explain that real quick. When I say inside edges, that doesn't mean the outer keys. That's right around what you would say the rim of the Gulf beats the coast here on the Big Bend area. That's where your trout are. Look for hard bottom and points. Jumping mullet always helps. And today we actually got a slam. We caught a nice snook, about a 32-inch snook, in 61-degree water. And there was more of them with them on the outside keys. And lots of nice redfish. The whole thing that stinks right now is I'm looking at the front of a edge of a front, fixing to pass through, kicking around back to the north, about 15 to 20 knots tonight. So all our water will go back to China, and the real estate of China will stick up.
How long is that supposed to last?
Not long. This is just an overnighter. But as of the last week, we had... You know, we're getting near the full moon, so we got these big negative tides, and I wrote that in my weekly report with Florida Sportsman on the Big Bend about our tides here, especially in the Homosassa area, and the duration and how much moon and wind can affect it. And some people don't understand. They see the card, and the card says, "Well, it's high tide at noon. It's not high tide." Well, you know what? Welcome to the Big Bend, because wind and moon will greatly affect that.
and it just will push it out, and you won't get a high tide. In fact, it'll be low and lower. So we may have tomorrow with that, but looking forward to the rest of the week, we're looking at warmer temperatures and a more southerly breeze. Anytime we get that southwest, I mean, I'll even take a southeast, due west, northwest, and then you get a north or northeast, forget about it. And we're almost past those winter days right now to where we can start depending on those tides being a little more to what the book says. And, reason for it, we're pretty much the shallowest spot here on the Gulf Coast. So, you got to run so far out to deep water. But when you get heavy winds, full moons, negative tides, cold fronts and everything, greatly affects our area and affects the fishing. If you don't have any water, you're pretty much confined to the rivers. Or if you got a mud boat or an airboat, you can get into some backcountry. But even then, you may have to get out and walk.
Yeah, I tell you, people don't understand the effect of weather on the tide. They think that a high tide is always going to be a high tide. Not if you got wind pushing the water out of the body of water that you're in. I know here on the East Coast, we tell the guys all the time, when we have a strong west wind, get in your truck because so much of our area is visible, William, and you can see things that you could never see on a normal low tide.
Absolutely.
That old abandoned crab trap that you thought wasn't there anymore is still there, but you've got to be able to see it on a west wind low tide, which is the exact opposite for you guys on your side of the state, right?
Absolutely. We like those west winds unless it's associated with a hurricane. And today it blew southeast, and then it switched around 9 or 10 this morning. And I couldn't believe I saw the water coming. I don't know if it's just been blown out and it was going to force its way back in. But by 11 o'clock, we went from a negative 1.5 foot tide to a 1.5 to 2 foot high tide within an hour and a half. It came in really well, and the fish responded. And, redfish, we caught those mostly sight casting with live shrimp. And that was on the outside keys around St. Martin's area. But you get up toward the Big Bend, you get the mouth of those creeks or anywhere where there's rocky points that those fish are going to eat right now. It's same as watching the manatees in the river. I tell a lot of the anglers on the Big Bend area and here around Homosassa, Crystal River, that when you see the manatees leaving the springs of the river and hauling butt out there toward the Gulf, then it's going to be good fishing. They're going out there to eat grass. They've been holed up there at the springs until they've ate everything. Even people's ornamental, lawn plants that are hanging too close to the water, they're crawling up there eating those.
Yeah, I believe it.
So when the weather and water gets warm enough, you'll see the manatees just hightail it toward the Gulf to get to that grass out there. And that's a good sign. Now, when you see the manatees cruising back up the river, generally not a good sign. They're getting up there to get to that 72-degree water to survive. So, that's something I always look for, and, is a good gauge on how good the fishing may be that day.
I got to tell you, I came over to Crystal River to the plantation. My daughter was in town for a few days, and we went and swam with the manatees, which I had never done. Is really a lot of fun, but I wasn't nearly as impressed with the manatees as I was the 100-pound tarpon and the biggest snook I've ever seen on the West Coast. I got to tell you, there are some real pigs in those springs now.
Absolutely. And, that's something that, basically as a crow flies 40 miles south of us, you can't keep anything. But we caught nice snook today just because we got those springs, and I believe when it gets really cold that they have shelter that they can get to, and our fish in this area have learned. I don't know how they gauge it. That's just something God gave them, to run up there and get in the spring and survive, and why our snook population has gotten better over the last 5 years. It's exploded. And today, catching that one out there at 61 degrees water was just, cool to watch.
Mm-hmm. The water was 61 today?
61 out on the outside Gulf.
Okay, that's getting a little better.
Yep.
Getting a little better.
So, a little better.
Well, that's an outstanding report, and we appreciate it so much, William. Please tell me we can talk to you next week.
I'll be right here in downtown Homosassa if the traffic ain't bad.
keep him settled down there, William. Don't make me come over there and straighten them boys out. Now let's take a trip out of the Panhandle and check in with our buddy, Captain Tyler Massey. Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing good, Rick. How are you guys?
Outstanding, buddy. Is it warming up out there, Annie?
Oh, yeah, it's looking great now. We got a good 10-day forecast with, not much more cold weather in sight. So we're thankful for that and looking forward to doing some fishing.
Any fishing been going on?
So, yeah, inshore a little bit last couple of days this week. Not too much is changing still. We're getting out of the wintertime pattern a little bit. The trout and redfish are not going to be moving on the flats for probably another couple of weeks. We still are going after mainly the sheephead, the redfish, black drum on the bridges. So bridge fishing's been good. Fishing with, fiddler crabs, live shrimp on a Carolina rig, just fishing straight up and down by the piling. And then in the next, few days as it warms up, we're going to start looking towards our pass. A lot of the sheephead are going to start moving towards our pass and get ready for their spawning event that happens in a couple weeks. So, and that's just mainly inshore what we're looking on, working the bridges, the rock piles, and jetties in the pass. And then offshore, haven't been yet, but we got some good weather. We're planning on. We got a few trips coming up. We're going to be targeting mingo snappers, vermilion snappers offshore, and triggerfish also opens on March 1st for us. So looking forward to that again.
Yeah, I understand. There's talk of you guys getting some relaxing of your regulations on triggerfish, and I'd like to see that. I happen to think that triggerfish are very prolific, and I think they spawn in big numbers, and the idea of only keeping one sounds a little silly to me.
Yeah, definitely. And, we're looking forward to that too. I know there was questions being asked about, the limit could go to more per person. As of right now, it hasn't changed for us. Hopefully, even if we get to that 2 per person, that'll be a good change for us. But, even the longer season's good with me too. Starting to catch them in March, supposed to close at the end of May. So, that'll be good. Give us something to catch when we get offshore along with the vermilion snappers.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think when you make it to where you can only keep one species or 2 species, boy, you put a lot of pressure on those fish. I think it would let up on the pressure on your vermilions and on your red snapper when you've got them, when you've got that season going, if you could keep more triggerfish.
Yeah, and I agree that we talked before, on here, the more days of each species is all we're really looking for. If we only get to keep one of whatever, like that's a 15-inch triggerfish is a decent sized fish. That's good enough for us. Just when you're being on the water to be able to keep more, different species is always a plus.
Mm-hmm. Sure would be. Now, the best time for your sheepshead is right ahead of you, right? When they spawn on the reefs?
Oh, yeah. Our sheephead are going to start trucking it towards our path in the next 2 weeks or so. I'd say the middle of March through the first week of April get absolutely out of control, where, you catch a limit in 15 minutes of fishing around our pass, whether it's on the jetties or in the deep water middle or pass or on the close wrecks offshore. So in the next couple of weeks, it's really going to take off, and it's going to be, easy pickings. The limits change on sheephead, so it's 8 per person, not 15 anymore. So hopefully the population continues to grow and doesn't take a step backwards like it has before.
Love it. Love it. Yep. Boy, if you can limit out at 8 per person, that's still a monstrous pile of sheepshead at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, for sure. We limit to 10 per boat. So we're not keeping over 10 sheephead on our charters. So, that's plenty of fish for the guys to eat. A lot of fun. We'll catch and release them until we're out of hook. So, but we don't take more than 10, and we're going to keep doing that.
Love your attitude, Cap. We will talk with you next week if that's okay.
I'll be here. We'll see you guys.
All right. Thanks so much, Captain Tyler Massey, with a great report from the Panhandle. And that puts a wrap on our trip around the state tonight. It was interesting. There's change in the air. You can feel it. I tell you what, Craig Sutton in Nosara, he hopes there's no change in the air as they are racking up double-digit sailfish releases. But when you come back to Florida, things are starting to change as our water warms a little bit. Our trout and reds are on the move, and sheepshead will be the big deal going forward on into March. That's when they spawn, and we've got to take care of them. We got to watch how many we take, but there are plenty to be caught once we get past the end of February. Now, I was really intrigued by the number of mahi that have been hanging in the southeast area. I tell you what, Captain John Earhart said that the dolphins showed up there a month ago, and they haven't left. They're still catching 10, 15, up to 20 dolphin a day, trolling ballyhoo off Stewart. That's fantastic news. Alan Sherman was a little discouraged. He said things have been really tough down there. Very few sailfish and only a handful of kingfish for those guys. Their inshore fishing has been good for mutton snapper, but there aren't a lot of them legal. It's also, the good news is, it's been good for grouper. Now, a lot of those fish are breaking them off, but it's awfully good to see them. Over in the 10,000 Islands, Steve Dahl never has a bad day. The trout are biting, the reds are biting, and the snook are biting. I've got to get to Southwest Florida. Greg Stamper talking about the monster permit they've got on their wrecks out there. I've never caught a big permit, and I've always wanted to. I know Captain Ray Markham will be glad to see June 1st get here, as his fishery will open back up for reds and trout. They're starting to catch them really good. They've recovered from that bad red tide from 2 years ago. They've kept the lid on keeping those fish, and I think that's a good thing. But you watch my word, that's going to be just like a forest fire, and they're going to be in for banner fishing before too terribly long at all. Get up in the Big Bend. William Toney is loving life right now. Said they're sight hunting redfish, throwing live shrimp at them, and the fish are taking them regularly, and there are plenty of trout around. So things are pretty good there. Out on the Panhandle, Captain Tyler Massey said it's time for the sheephead to head to the pass and commence their spawn. That is going to be some of their best fishing of the year. You heard him. The limit's 8, but on their charters, their 2-man charters, they have limited each boat to 10 per person. I think that's a strong move. You got to protect the fishery, and they're doing a great job of it. Hey, I know I've sure enjoyed bringing you our Action Spotter podcast tonight. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe to it. I know that you heard the tone of the guys around the state. They're all upbeat. They're all looking forward to a great spring. I think the worst of winter is over, and I can't wait for next week when we're back with another Action Spotter. Of course, it'll be brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano. By Tournament Master Chum, the best chum on earth. By Nosara Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. And by Young Boats. You want the finest in flat span offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Until next week, I'm Captain Rick Riles, and we'll see you on the rip.